I would introduce Dan to be doing his thing. He would normally introduce the guest speaker, but being he is the guest speaker here. So have a good time. I'm gonna go sit down and relax and enjoy myself. This is nice. I like this portion of the job. Unless I'm up here doing the
Okay, what this originally started out is that the VA approached Mina, who's the daughter of the gentleman for Canes for Heroes, to go ahead and make some benches to put down at the VA clinic at Fort McPherson. They have got a shortage of wheelchairs, and when they go and they wheel the guys outside to wait for the shuttle, the buses,
I tried.
they are not able to leave the chairs out there because they got a shortage of chairs and there's nowhere to sit. So Mina went ahead and came to us and asked us if we would consider doing something like that, and they would go ahead and supply the wood. We said yes. Jack and I said we would go ahead and work on this project. And at the last minute, Mina said, well, I'm going to try to get sponsorship for the wood. So they're still working on that. And we didn't want to leave Rob in a lurch for this class, so we decided we're going to go ahead and do something. So Jack and I were looking at this plan that I went ahead and found, and we came up with this idea to do some different variations on it. And basically what we're trying to do is get you, when you see a plan, think outside the box.
I don't know
What else could this plan be? How could you modify this plan to do something else? So we've come up with these two different styles. Jack has been under the weather for the last week, so last 2.5 weeks, so he wasn't a lot of help. My wife has been after me to make a bench to put out on her deck. I say it's her deck because I can't get on it. There's too many flowers and crap on it. To go ahead and put plants on and a place for people to sit. So I said, well, what if I did this and I made a little planter pot on the end of it? So I went and decided to do that. My preference would have been to make it out of cedar. I couldn't spring the $100 to make it out of cedar, so she's getting it out of pressure treated, and I'm going to go and stain it eventually once it dries out. Some of the things on this plan, it's a very, very simple plan, but you have to be absolutely sure that your material, no matter what it is square on all four sides, and your cuts are square. Otherwise, this thing will not go together for heaven or money. Trust me, it will not go together. So I went ahead and did this at Rob's shop, and we made absolutely sure that his miter saw was cutting square and his table saw was cutting square, and we went ahead and did this one first. I figured if I went ahead and messed it up, I'd mess it up on the one that only costs about $20 to build rather than the other one. And I figured, okay, I made all of the errors that you could possibly make on this thing.
No, I found a couple.
You-
I made bench too, and I made a lot more errors.
Okay, then we'll hear from him too. I made all of the errors I could conceivably come up with on this one. One of the major things is that you have to, when you're putting your screws in, the plan says you can use 2-inch screws. I don't recommend 2-inch screws. I recommend 2.5-inch screws. End glue. You can't use glue only. It says you can use nails. You can't use nails. Nails are almost useless on this particular plan. But when you're going and putting your screws in for these upper corners, you have to keep track of where you're putting them and which corners. On the very last piece, I got this side, make sure I'm looking, I got this side right. For some reason I put this side in wrong, so I had to go ahead and redo. So that's why there's 4 spots on this one rather than only 2. I didn't make that error anywhere else in this, obviously on the final face. It really is a fun project. Once I ended up getting through putting it all together, no matter how hard you tried to keep all of these pieces square, once you go and start layering them, they don't come out square. There's always some variation in them, so you got to pull out the belt sander and belt sand. And thanks to my helper back there, Rob, at his shop, once I got all done, he says, well, I had a power planer, would have made that so much easier after I was done. So a power planer is a lot of help, the hand power planer. Makita's cordless hand power planer, not the big surface planer. This one here took me probably 12 hours to do total with sanding. I'm going to give this one to my niece, to my granddaughter. It's not finished by any stretch of the imagination because I have no idea what my wife is going to want and what her mother is going to want. So I'm going to let them argue over it, and then I'll go ahead and do whatever they decide.
So the VA clinic, as Dan said, at Fort McPherson, they have elderly patients. They travel by bus. They have to take the patients down. They have to take the patients down to the bus. They use wheelchairs. The problem is they don't have enough wheelchairs to just leave them there, and there's no place for these elderly patients to sit while they wait for the bus. So they approached Canes for Heroes, Mina. Can we get a couple? Can you help us with a couple benches? And Mina approached us. So we talked a lot about the requirements that were needed for these benches. 2 benches, 6 foot long. They're actually going to be in an area where there's upright pillars and there's 8 foot, so we're going to make them 6 foot long. They will be outside, but they'll have some cover to protect them from a lot of the rain. We decided we needed a weather-resistant wood, and right now we had picked cedar or cypress. With this prototype, maybe we'll go to pressure treated. Not sure.
Is there a weight issue between cedar, cypress, and pressure treated?
Yes,
Oh, yes.
just that much.
We went out and we did a cost of what it would take to build them out of, I think it was cedar or cypress. It's about $110 worth of wood
Per bench.
per bench. So the next problem was what kind of design to use. We wanted something that was simple, easy to build, sturdy, and durable. So Dan found this on the web, and these are the prototypes for it. You notice we thought it'd be real easy to build, but we found you have to be pretty exact. It is very good looking, and you have drainage for water. Very sturdy. Parts list. Well, according to them, and this is for a 6 foot bench, you need 9 2x4s that are 8 foot long, 3 1x4s that are 8 foot long, and wood screws, finished nails, and what I found on one I built, lots of glue. Cost. We said about 105, 110 cypress. We're currently looking for a sponsor. Mina's doing that. In the meantime, as Dan already said, we built prototypes out of pine. And the prototypes are somewhere around $20, $30 to build a bench like that out of pine. I did one 30 inches long and I spent $20 on the wood. I would figure about $5 extra for glue and screws and so forth. So what did we find? It's heavy. Pine is, what'd you say, 47 pounds for this?
This one here I put on my scale at home, it weighs 47 pounds.
What, 40 pounds of wood and 7 pounds of glue?
I'm not as bad as Rob, thank you very much.
But you can imagine this 6 foot long and made out of, imagine you made it out of oak or even the pressure treated.
Pressure treated, heavier than oak.
Yeah.
This one here I estimate is about 140 pounds.
That is one of the pluses. It's not going to move. It's not going to do, be a problem. Also found out you need to plan how to put it together. On the one I was building, I was really smart and said, I'm not going to use any screws or nails. I don't need that. The glue joint, the surface area is so big, it's going to be stronger than anything. Turns out you don't need screws for strength. What you need it for is when you glue those pieces together, trying to keep them aligned is almost impossible. They're going to slide, you're going to clamp, it's going to move, and the pin nails for the 1x4s, screws for the 2x4s, absolutely needed to get it together correctly. Dan, you had said that nails were almost useless.
Yes, nails are almost useless on this. I did go ahead and find pin nails are helpful in adjoining the 1x4 to the 2x4 to get ready for the next 2x4 that you're going to screw in. But that there's really about the only use that you're going to have for nails is just going and holding that 1x4.
One thing I saw on the web, I haven't even tried it, but regarding glue joints that are slipping, this person recommended throwing salt into the joints. And the grip apparently prevents the slipping, but I don't know what it does to the glue. I don't know. Like I said, I've never tried it, so.
I have actually done some research on that.
Okay.
The salt, you have to be very, very sparing with it, and it will degrade the glue. And when you have got a surface area as large as these are, you're not going to get your joint is not going to go flat. You're going to have to clamp it like crazy to literally squeeze the granules of salt into the grain of the wood. So I wouldn't recommend it. Yes, Alex?
So Dan, you said you didn't recommend nails, because I guess they might slip, but how about wooden dowels? Could that work?
It's a lot of extra work that's really not necessary. If you use deck screws, especially on like this one here, the ones that we're going to do for the VA that are going to be outdoors, we're going to use deck screws on those. They're going to hold up better. They're not going to rust due to the acids that are in the actual wood.
But also keep in mind, once the glue sets, you've got a pretty sturdy system. And there could be a ton of screws in there. I know the one I did, a ton of screws in it, but you don't see them unless they're on the surface, because if you're putting them in here, they're covered.
On this one here, I just used Tight Bond 2. On this one here, I use 3. And also, if you end up using pressure-treated wood, I highly recommend you let it dry out as much as possible before you even go and start. This here, we didn't have the privilege of letting it dry out as much as I would have liked. And there's glue still weeping out of the bottoms of the legs.
How many days? It's been 2 days?
It's been 3 days since we went and glued that up.
This last point is probably the most important. It's got to be flat, got to be square. You've got to have tight seams on it for it to look right.
You can go ahead and wait to mill it until it goes ahead and dries out some. I mean, this here was some really wet stuff, and even going and letting it sit in Rob's shop for almost 3 days, it went ahead and it dried out some, but there was still a lot of moisture in it. And, you know, if I would have had my way, I probably would have let it go ahead and acclimate for at least a week or more before I ended up starting to mill it or put it together.
Keep in mind that you are going to have to plane it down. You're going to have, because the 2x4s come with very rounded edges, so you've got a good bit to take off.
With pressure treated, there's what they call kiln dried after treatment. So after they treat it, they kiln dry it. It's more expensive, but it is much more stable.
True.
I like that. Yeah.
Where do you get it?
If you can find it in the Atlanta area.
Got that lumber yard. The
What
brand name is
kind of
Lumber.
joints are those? Are those all just square joints? Are they half lap joints? What?
Square joints, flat, everything is flat, everything is square. I mean, that there is why, you know, I was looking at the plan and I said, oh, this here is going to be fairly easy to go and do. And once you actually get into it, it's a little bit more involved than you would go and think, going ahead and making sure everything is flat and square.
To be quite honest, once you've got it in, once the glue is dry, my opinion is that's pretty sturdy. That's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, this thing here is going to last my granddaughter's lifetime and my great-grandchildren's lifetimes. Easy.
Do you fasten the cross piece to the piece running up and down, or is that just glue?
It's glue and a screws. There's 2 in the legs and 2 up here to keep it from racking.
Something to keep in mind is this piece is solid. So as a result, what you have is a solid piece that will keep the upright and this from racking.
Having a domino in there didn't hurt.
No, we actually used dominoes in the 2x4s in both that as well as this one here. That there added a little bit of time but made things a little bit easier. So going and doing that was helpful.
We also realized after working on this that the basic bench, which Dan found from the internet, is great, but there's a ton of variations you could do with this, and it really goes as far as your imagination will go. The original was, I think, 6 foot in the plans.
Right.
Well, here's a 2 foot. Mine was 30 inches because the wood, it worked with the wood I had. Could be almost any length you want. Dan came up with the idea of putting a planter in one end. And what's that, about 4 foot?
Yeah.
I had the idea of what would happen if you, instead of making a bench that you sit this way, you called this the front, and you just made some of these pieces longer, and you had a back. You make it into a chair. We have also talked about the 1x4s. Those could be a different wood. They could be stained different. So you now have alternating light-dark colors on it. Makes it a little more attractive.
There was also one that we thought of, is that going ahead and making this about 4 feet long, 6 feet long, and going ahead and bringing this in and let it come up about 5 feet or so, and go ahead and put coat hooks on it. That there was one that I'm actually playing around with now, is to go ahead and make a potter's bench out of it using 2x2s.
You know, you don't use something like that here, but up north, people come in, they've got snow on the boots or mud or whatever, and they'll have an entranceway. Sometimes it's just called a mud hall or whatever. You could have that, what Dan said, you can hang the coats up there, you can have a bench for people to sit while they take their boots off. And one of the ideas we had when we started was to make just the facing 2x6. It'd give it a more massive look, and as we needed more weight on the
Yeah.
bench. But it's almost tons of ideas. We wanted to say, what could you think you could do with it?
Is there a particular order you have to assemble that thing in?
I went ahead and tried to do it standing up, not this way, but starting it this way and clamping it as I went. That really didn't work. The easiest way is this way. And you just go ahead and build it from the bottom up. If you go ahead and make your 2x2x4s in frames and you're using dominoes for that, or dowels or whatever you want to use, you don't have to, okay? But it just seemed to make it easier. And then you go ahead and lay your 1x4 on it, you glue it, pin nail it, and then you lay your next frame on it, glue, screw through it, and you keep on going like that.
Keep in mind, as you build this, you really only have 3 different parts. This, and the 1x4. So as you cut it, and as you find you have to cut it very square, very, very correctly, you can almost mass produce. You're mass producing the parts. You're cutting them all at once, and then it's just an assembly. Build the first layer. At least I did this. Build the first layer out, put the 1x4 on, and they just keep going.
Yeah. The other is, it's easy when you're going ahead and lining it up that the piece will go ahead and start to slide to one side. So having a square, checking each row as you end up going up, the sides, the top, to make sure that you're not sliding to one side or the other. You may go and look that, okay, this is square, these are square, but when you get up about 3-4 pieces, you go and you look at it and say, and you put a square to it and you're off like about 1/8 of an inch or so. So going ahead and using a square is still very helpful to make sure that you're coming up straight. Yes, Rob?
When you made the other one pressure treated, you made them in sets of frames and then you assembled. Do you think that was easier than, I think the method of doing one layer and then put the other one on top of it, that way you could have glued all those each one at a time. Which was easier, the frames or just doing it one row at a time?
Going ahead and working with the 2x4 frames pre-glued made it easier somewhat. Once more, you have to be careful when you're going and gluing these legs on it that these legs are being glued square. And if not, then your legs go every which way.
Did you use some kind of a fixture when you were creating that U-shaped frame?
Unfortunately not. Our master for that was not available to us.
One of the things the VA has said also they'd like to have is on the face, they want to have an inset so that they can mount for each branch of the service a medallion. And one of the things that I had thought about is if we have more time, we could take, before we assemble, take this, put it through the CNC and put your name, if you're giving it to a child, put their name, put almost anything you want would go into the face of that.
You also can do inlays,
Inlays?
Yes.
so you don't have to take the piece itself, just cut the inlays on the CNC and then insert them like we did with the Lance event.
All right.
Mm-hmm. You know, the pardon?
What kind of finish do you plan?
None. Possibly none. At the most, we may use oil.
Yeah.
Since these here are going to be made out of cedar, we may go and oil them, but we're not at that point right now.
One of the things I've found, by the way, those Adirondack chairs I built with cypress, I put polyurethane on, looked gorgeous for a couple weeks. And then you find that the wood is so oily, it doesn't stick well. So back to oil. As I had said, I've been sick for the past 2 weeks, and I finally started building one like 2 days ago, and it's good to call it a prototype. Because I learned a lot of what not to do. And you know, it's surprising, if you come up and just pick up this, you find out how heavy just even a small pine one is.
How many 2x4s did it take to make that small one?
3 2x4s and 2 1x4s. 8 foot.
From what I saw when Dan was doing, you need a lot of clamps.
Yeah, you want a lot of clamps. I did not have enough clamps at my shop, so I'm glad I didn't decide to start it there. This one still wouldn't be done.
The gaps on the pressure treated one, looks like there's 2 different gaps. Is that,
Well, rather than using a 1x4 here, we went ahead and found that if we used the 1x4 there, we were going to have to notch out a 2x4 in order to have that pot
okay, so that was.
Sit in.
That was to accommodate your pot.
right, without having to take a router out and trying to notch it and fit it back in again. We just put a 2x4 in there, which fit perfectly, and it gives it about 1/8 of an inch of clearance.
So a different sized pot would result maybe in different.
Yes.
And while it's 6 foot, keep in mind you've got 7 2x4s.
Yeah.
That's a lot of
18
strength.
inches, yeah, that's.
If you come up here and sit on it, you can tell how strong
You
these
couldn't
things are.
stand enough people on the 7 2x4s on edge to cause it to flex.
Right.
Right. You know, there is an unbelievable amount of strength in them. I believe if we even made it 8 foot, I don't think it would flex.
So,
But it'd be heavy.
Huh?
It'd be heavy.
It would be heavy. However, if it's made out of cedar or cypress, it's going to be half the weight of that one is.
So if you were to take, with that idea, make the 1x4s this long,
right,
and then put a cap on it, you now have a bench with armrests.
yep. What's the height of the bench?
The height of the bench is 18 inches.
Is that what the finished product would be?
Yes. I mean, it would be just like that one. That there is also 18 inches. Yes, Carol?
There's something aesthetically appealing about nice crisp edges.
Yeah, there is. And you know, that there's kind of what went ahead and drew me to this plan once I ended up running across it, is that the cleanness of it. You didn't have to worry about a lot of contouring that was going to get chewed up or anything like that. I mean, at the most, you get the edge would get a little bit ding. You take a little bit of sandpaper, you smooth the corners off, and you're good. Besides, I don't think a 4-year-old's going to do a whole lot to this. In fact, once we go and put it down in her room, she ain't going to move it until she's at least 12. Please come up, check them out.